Gentlemen, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. Just doing my Wednesday show here today. And one of the things that I am noticing, just not necessarily even the manosphere per se, but sort of in popular culture, certainly in the hustle sphere, I guess, is this want to dig in and to become or align oneself or one's brand, I should say, with red pill ideas, but only insofar as they're palatable to whatever belief set that person sort of espouses, I guess, is their brand of me. As you know, my forte, I guess, is to be as rational as I possibly can be, right? The rational male. But also to be as objective as I can be. And sometimes that means pointing things out when I have to point them out. It's very difficult to do shows like the one I'm going to do today. And the reason for that is because a lot of times whenever I am critical of people who are, let's say, well-known brands, you always run the risk of stepping on people's toes. And I'm not necessarily saying people are fanboys, but there's a certain, let's say, impression. There's an atmosphere. There's a reputation that goes along with a lot of people. Whenever I talk about, whenever I sort of take Jordan Peterson to task, that's always a good show, because people know who he is and they have their impressions already set about a guy like that since 2017. So I'm not here to offend anybody. I'm not here to just jump on anybody's ass or anything like that. My interest in this is just sort of calling out what I'm seeing here so that you guys have a clearer picture of what's going on. This isn't to say you suck. That's not what this is about. I want to use opportunities like the one I'm about to present to you here to develop a bigger picture. And it's very popular right now to hold men responsible. As you know, I have talked about the responsibility versus authority theme, I guess, idea for a very long time right now. That's one aspect of all this. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But more importantly, I think that there is this maybe expectation from certain personalities, online personalities, to sort of rise above things right now. One common theme that I'm seeing all over the place right now is the idea that the dating market sucks, right? The sexual marketplace which is something the red pill and the manosphere have been talking about for at least 20 years that I've been in it, is really a difficult experience for people who are, single, young, even old. So if you are coming back into the sexual marketplace after, say, a divorce or whatever, and now you're just sort of waking up to intersexual dynamics, that's one thing. It's another thing to have to navigate the sexual marketplace in 2020, in the 21st century in some cases, right? So I think that a lot of what I define as old order thinking in my fourth book, which is The Rational Male Religion, go pick it up. It's now on Audible. Is that there is this old order 20th century way of thinking about things. And we are still trying to force fit those old ways of thinking, or what we think should work, with respect to intersexual dynamics, with respect to men and women, with respect to forming families, when it comes to sex, when it comes to dating, when it comes to all that good stuff, when it comes to men meeting women and women meeting men, all that great stuff. We have this old way of thinking about it, this old order way of thinking. And we're trying to force fit it into what we know about men and women and our natures and psychology and evolutionary psychology and sociology and anthropology and all of the advancements that we have made over the course of, let's just round it off and say 100 years. We're trying to force fit what we think should be applicable and should be true into a 21st century understanding of what the sexual marketplace really is, that is being thrust in our face every day. So the first video that I'm going to talk about today is actually Jocko Willink. Got it. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think I did. I've had this video on deck for a while. And again, I like Jocko a lot. And I understand why he's popular. I understand why personalities such as Candace Owens and other, let's just say, more traditionally minded tradcons Really like Jocko, and I like him as well. He's a likable guy. There's no getting around that. Clearly a man's man, clearly an alpha male, clearly a guy who understands masculinity, certainly understands where he fits, let's just say, in the world, and is definitely, like everyone else, a brand of me today. And so I got a hold of one of his more recent videos where he's talking about red flags. And I want to dig into the topic of red flags first here, because that's a common theme that gets bounced around the manosphere constantly. These are the things to look out for, right? Rich Cooper has made a very successful show based on, before the train wreck, right? And 90% of the time when guys call in to get advice, or they're hitting me up in my conference calls or one-on-one, usually it's stuff that they should have seen before. And it's very easy to stand back and have this kind of God's eye view of what you should have done, man. You picked the wrong one. You didn't think about it. You didn't vet. You didn't have standards. You didn't whatever. You bought the car off the lot, sight unseen. Maybe you took it for one test drive and then you decided to buy a lemon. And it's very easy for us to sit back and go, well, you made your bed and now it's time to lie in it, especially when it comes to guys. Because for men, we expect men to be responsible. There's this expectation of responsibility. And even in the absence of authority, we say, you know what? You should have known better. You should have performed better. You should have done better. And the reason why you're getting raked over the coals in a divorce, the reason why your kids hate you, the reason why you're splitting up, it's because you didn't do the work. You didn't perform well enough. And by performance in this case, I mean, you didn't vet well enough. You didn't marry well. You didn't think about things before you let your little head do the thinking for the big head. And that's a topic I really want to talk about today as well, is the idea that when we're looking, we're very judgmental of men, by the way. We're not allowed to be judgmental of women, simply because, again, it's the respect thing. For women, there's this default respect that we're just supposed to have for women, and then there is a merit-based respect that we're supposed to have for men. That's the masculine and feminine differences in respect. Respect is something that's always on. It's a courtesy. It's just something, if you don't respect women, well, the reason for that is simply because women are women, and you're supposed to respect them. And any guy, like, say, a man's man is going to tell you the same thing. Any blue pill alpha is going to tell you the same thing. In fact, they're going to be rewarded with attention, female attention, for calling you out and turning you into the villain in that case, because you did not respect that woman just outright by default. But if you're a man and your performance is not up to snuff, or your performance wasn't, for whatever reason, adequate to meet the challenge, and in this case, maybe it was you got with the wrong person. You just married the wrong girl. She's the wrong chick, dude. You're just going after the wrong girls. I have a full essay on this, by the way, which is called, I think I even called it The Wrong Girl. And the wrong girl is always the one who was a quality woman when you met her, a quote unquote quality woman. And I want to talk about the idealization of a quality woman. There are very few guys who just sort of stumble into marriage and say, you know what? Well, I knew she wasn't a quality woman in the beginning, but I married her anyways. There's very few guys that are going to do that. Every guy who gets into that situation will find some way to gaslight himself into believing that he's doing the right thing. It seemed like the right idea at the time. She seemed like she was hot. She's fun. She was so much different when I met her. And now she's a shrew, and now I'm in a sexless marriage, and now I am whatever, run down the list of why you're miserable in your marriage, or you're miserable with your girlfriend, and you just simply can't extricate yourself from that whole thing. Well, when we look at a guy like that, we say, oh, dude, it's on you. It was your responsibility. If you'd have done more, if you'd have performed better, if you'd have been on your game, if you'd been not chasing women and you'd been doing the work, and if you'd been doing all this, again, I'm not coming down on that idea. I'm just saying that when we see a guy in that position, we say, oh, what? Didn't you see all the red flags? Didn't you notice all of the things that were wrong with this woman before you got into it? And the answer is no. Often enough, it is no. And the reason why it's no is because guys will say, well, you're thinking with the little head instead of the big head. Well, Yeah, that's probably the case in some instances, but it could also be simply because of necessity. 80% of men are unattractive to women. They are below average. There are several and not just the dataclysm numbers, I should say, but there are several studies, several research data sets that show it as late as I think in 2019 or 2020 that on average women rate men 80%, at least 80% of men as unattractive or below average. I mean, this doesn't mean average. That's below average. I would be, I don't really have the data sets for this, but I would wonder what is average, the percentage of average, and then the percentage of above average. But if you are in the vast majority of men in the global sexual marketplace today, most women vote most men as unattractive. Simple as that. So when an unattractive guy or a below average guy gets his shot, the idea of him vetting and accurately and trying to be in any way kind of picky, it's like beggars can't be choosers. There are at least 80% of men are beggars. And I don't mean pussy beggars. I mean like just beggars in the sense that their sexual opportunity is few and far between. And we can see that in the numbers of guys who have been virgins since 2008 to 2018, thanks to the general survey study. I've shown those numbers several times. But these are things that I kind of need to build up today's show around, because what happens is at this stage, there are so many traditional conservatives. There's so many people, and I don't want to say there are far right guys, but there are so many guys and women right now who want to find an easy explanation as to why guys are dropping out, as to why guys are becoming the lost boys generation. They're just hooked on pornography. They're just hooked on video games. They're not enrolling in college. They're not going out there, not developing themselves. They're not doing the work. They're not focusing on their mission. They're not performing. They're not measuring up to their burden of performance. And in this case, depending on what the mindset is and the ideology is, the end goal of that burden of performance is to, in some way, be a suitable, acceptable father and husband for a woman when she's ready for you, when you've measured up, when she suddenly has some magical ability to be judgmental of you. Men are not allowed to be judgmental of women. We're not allowed to judge. And I think that's a great misgiving of this day and age. It's a great misunderstanding, but honestly, I think it's deliberate. We're not allowed to be judgy. We're not allowed to be judgmental. We're not even allowed to be discerning. And so when I talk about how men do not have standards for women today, it's generally because 80% of those men are below average, and they don't have the opportunities that at least 20% of the average to above average men do. And we know this now. We have known this for a long time. We've known this at least since 2016, because I was writing about this way back in the day when Breitbart was covering the fact that guys were dropping out. That's where you got the dropout generation. 2016, 2017, 2018, Jordan Peterson calls them the Lost Boys generation. Indeed, they are. In fact, I can go all the way back to 2010 or 2012 when Hannah Rosen wrote her article in The Atlantic called The End of Men. Go look it up. That was the future calling, boys. That was the crystal ball in the hand of Hannah Rosen. And here we are in 2021, and we're still talking about the same thing, but we've got to find some sort of rationale. We've got to find some way to force fit all of this data and all of this 21st century new order data and understanding into an old order way of thinking about it, into a way that kind of makes sense to an ideology or an ego investment in those belief sets that should work. So what is that? Well, since we can't be judgmental of women, we've got to be then judgmental of men, because it's their responsibility to measure up, to be what we expect them to be. And they're not doing that. They're not going to college. They're not enrolling. They don't want to talk to women. They're afraid. No, well, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but maybe they are just simply cautious. We don't want to use terms like cautious. We want to find some way to shame men into getting off their asses. And I'm not saying that they don't need to, they do. But what I'm focusing on today in this show is the fact that we're finding ways to force fit those guys or force fit that data, that uncomfortable, unflattering truth that we see into what we think ought to be the way things are. So when we look at this, and we're not allowed to talk about women, we're not allowed to bring up any kind of unflattering truths about women. So what do? We go hard at the guys. And especially from a traditional conservative set, it's almost too easy to do. So you've got guys say, well, you chose the wrong one. You didn't do the work. Look at you. You're still living at home with your parents. Whether that's socioeconomic, whether that's just you being a lazy ass, makes no difference. You're still there. The data is you're still there. You're still, sleeping it off, doing whatever it is that you're doing. We want to blame it on porn. That's an easy out because it fits into that old order of, well, this is the way things ought to be. And we're going to talk about that soon in the month of November. I'm sure we're going to get into the NoFap topics. Just please wait a little bit for that. I want to when the time is ripe. But for right now, what I'm seeing, and I think you're probably going to see this actually sort of get tagged on to the NoFap November or No Nut November or whatever it is that we're going to lose our minds over. Now, remember, I think it's November 17th is the International Men's Day. Oh boy, wait till you hear the narratives on November 17th. I'm calling it right now. This show is going to be, I'm recording this on November 2nd. I will guarantee you on November 17th, when we're supposed to be focusing on men and we're supposed to be, really International Men's Day is just something I think that the internet has sort of brought up or has sort of mixed up somehow. But watch what a gynocentric social order does with International Men's Day. They do it every year. I'm not rollotomassi here. I don't have to be a fortune teller to tell you what's going to happen. I think you probably already know what's going to happen. What happens then is men aren't living up. Men don't have they're not taking responsibility. We need more fathers in the house. We need more involved parenting from guys. We need it's not a single motherhood. It's fatherless homes. How can we rephrase this? We have an International Men's Day. So how can we use this to a gynocentric advantage? Just watch. Every single year, it's exactly the same thing. So what you will see coming, I think, from a traditional conservative, the tradcon side of things, is you're going to see, again, this hard push for men to take more responsibility. They think that by saying, you know what, man up, a real man takes responsibility. Well, thank you, Matt Walsh. Thank you, Jocko. Thank you, whoever on. Thank you, Ben Shapiro. Thank you for your wonderful insight and wisdom. I wouldn't have figured that out by myself. And it's not like we haven't heard that about a bajillion times from guys just like you over the years. And we're still talking about it. And it still makes for great clickbait. It still makes for a great show. It still man, men need to man up. Yeah, we need more fathers in the home. And okay, great. And then they move on to whatever else. And you know what? They've been doing that at least since 2016, probably prior to that as well. But again, it's easier to do it with guys because we won't focus on women. We won't focus on holding women accountable for their own choices. We won't hold women accountable unless it's on Fresh and Fit. And what do? We throw rocks and sling mud at Fresh and Fit. But you know what they're doing? At the very least, say what you want to. I don't care. Whatever you want to talk about that format, they're doing something that no one else is doing. They're doing something that is not, you're never going to see in the mainstream. You are definitely not going to see it in mainstream traditional conservative talk shows. So I want to get into this. Let's move into what I've got here. These are the red flags. This is the wisdom of Jocko Willink. Got it. Here we go.
Don't get your expectations too high.
Yeah.
Which is what we have to watch out for because we meet, Jessica.
Hell yeah, Jessica.
And she's good looking and she's nice to you. And so you take that trajectory of the first two data points that are both pointing up and you just turn that into freaking an angel.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
With a future,
with kids, like the whole 9 yards. Yeah. You have two data points.
Yeah.
One, she's cute. Two, she's nice to you. at that moment.
At that moment.
If you take those 2 data points and run freaking buck wild.
Yeah.
For a female, you take a dude. He's a handsome dude and he's nice to you. There's 2 data points. And you're going thinking that this is it. This is the one. Do not do that. Gather more data.
All right. So bring him out. All right. We've already used the one in casual conversation. You already know what I'm going to say about that. There is no one. Let's kill, if nothing else, let us kill the soulmate myth right now. Please let us kill that. You want to talk about old order thinking? But one of the reasons I put, the fallacy of the one. There is no one. The reason why that is the very first chapter in The Rational Male, in my book, The Rational Male, is because I thought if guys picked up this book and they made it past the introduction, and let's just say they only read one chapter, that was the one I wanted them to walk away with. There is no one. That right there, understanding that simple truth, understanding that the soulmate myth is exactly that, is a myth. That is the most, if you only get one message from my book, I hope that's it. Dispel that myth right there. But we still, in 2021, in the 21st century, we cling to that old order way of thinking. Now, guys are going to say, well, that's just him. He's using that in casual conversation. Yeah, he is. But how many times do you hear people say that? How many times people say, just the very fact that he would think that other people would think that this person is the one, that leads me to believe that there is this soulmate myth that is underlying, and that is an old order way of thinking. That is an old order trope. And we need to flush that down the toilet, flush that down the 20th century toilet right now. And say, oh, well, you're not a romantic. No, I'm very much a romantic. Oh, you're not emotional. I'm very much emotional. That's why you have to get rid of that very damaging mythology. So that's number one. Number two is this. And throughout this, and again, I'm coming down on Jocko here. I'm just saying that this is the system, right? This is the process. This is the way things ought to be. They're not quite the way that they are right now. And he's not, in this evaluation, he would not be incorrect if we were in, say, the late 90s or maybe even the mid 2000s. I'm not saying, oh, it's just old. He's just old and that's just not how we do things anymore. In effect, it isn't. But the problem is most guys don't even get to the point where they're vetting. They're not even getting to that point. They're not even getting to the point where they have to look for red flags. And yes, if they aren't seeing those or if they're looking past them, it's not because they're dumb. It's not because they are irresponsible. They are necessitous. Necessitous men are never free. If you need something, you're going to find a way to get that. Even if you have to backwards rationalize it later, even if you have to gaslight yourself into believing that you've got a quality woman in spite of all of the red flags, right? Like a Chinese communist parade. In spite of that, you will still look past all of that because your opportunities are few and far between.
You observe, right? If you're looking, if you're walking up to a cave and you thought there was a lion in there, right? Are you and you want to gather some data? Like you see let's see you see some lion scat outside, right?
Sure, hell yeah.
Let's see you see some lion prints outside. You got 2 data points.
Yeah.
Seems like there's a lion in there.
Yeah.
Do you go running into the cave looking for the lion? No, you don't. So let's not do that here. Let's stay outside the cave. Gather more data points without running into the cave is my recommendation. Here's another thing, and this is kind of along the same lines. People aren't who you want them to be. They are who they are. And you can't confuse those things. And you can't think that you're going to take someone who is the way they are and change them into who you want them to be. Now, how do we not get hurt? I'll tell you how you don't get hurt. When you stay outside collecting data points, you don't overcommit. When the lion comes out or the lioness comes out with its mouth dripping with blood and you see it from 200 yards away through your binoculars, you go, oh, cool. Good to see that. Now I didn't lose my larynx. to this animal. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Now I didn't get my head slashed apart.
Yeah.
So when you get to see someone, when you get more data and you realize that someone isn't who you thought they were, you go, oh, cool. I'm glad I didn't invest a bunch of time, money, commitment, effort into this relationship when all that would have happened is I would have gotten my heart ripped out and eaten.
All right. So to get to that point, to get to those data points, to understand that other person, we're talking about like relationship formation at this stage. We're not even talking about spinning plates. We're not even talking about like attracting women at this point. But to collect those data points, to use his analogy, to collect those, you've got to get into the relationship in the first place, Jocko. You still have to get there. And again, when 80% of guys are below average and they get to that point, what do you think they're going to do? Well, you should have been more responsible. The lion ripped your larynx out. Oh, well, you should have been smarter than that. Well, the problem is if you're a starving man in the desert and you see a cracker, you don't care if the cracker's poisoned or not. You don't care. You're a necessitous person. So there's the necessity side of things. There's the want, the desire for that. Then there is the ability for most guys to gaslight themselves into believing that the red flags that they are seeing, the lion scat around the cave, is something that is insignificant, inconsequential to what the end goal needs to be. Now, this is presuming guys are going to do this in the first place. Because to understand, to avoid all of this wasted effort and wasted energy and everything else in this data collection, you've got to at least invest something of yourself or something of your time to figure those things out. So when women like such as Lauren Southern come at me for saying, oh, it's important for you to understand genuine desire, when it is important for you to understand the importance of spinning plates and dating non-exclusively, however you choose to define that or employ that, that we're collecting data. Are we not? Are we not figuring out what we want and what we don't want? Are we not figuring out what the personality flaws of that person are? Well, she's an alcoholic. She's bad with her kids. She's a single mom. She lied to me. Okay, well, you had to get into a position where you could discover that in the first place. And that is where that vetting process sort of falls apart, just crumbles at that stage. So what do we have to go on? Her social media? Well, we're not allowed to be judgmental about her social media. We're not allowed to be judgmental about the lion in the cave. It's just the lion. It's going to do what it's going to do. Well, we got to go figure out what it's all about. So when we see this, when we say, what's your sexual past? Who have you been with in the past? These are red flags to me, right? Why am I not allowed to do that? But my performance and the consequences of my incompetence in that performance is met with, well, you should have known better. Well, that's great, man. It's awesome to be able to sit in a position of sort of judgment and tell a guy that, who you couldn't say about the girl, about the woman. Well, she's got a special set of conditions. I've said this a million times on Twitter. There is a separate standard of justice for women. Part of that separate standard revolves around the fact that we're simply not allowed to judge women. We're not allowed to be judgmental. We're not allowed to even be discerning, really. But that's what Jocko's telling us we need to do. But in the same breath, we're like, well, we're not supposed to. We wouldn't want to step on their feet. We want to empower women. We don't believe all women, right? We want to give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, let's give the lion in the cave the benefit of the doubt. If you get your face ripped off, well, you should have known better. You should have saw the red flags that were her teeth and claws.
Yeah.
Walk away. Don't look back. Don't be a jerk about it. Mm-hmm. But say, hey, Jessica, it was awesome to know you. I really appreciate it. I'll see you out sometime. Mm. Then walk away and don't look back. What we do is we look back. What we do is not we just look back. We start walking back. We crawl back. We see if they're looking. We try and get their attention. It's a freaking disaster. Walk away. Don't look back.
Yeah. Sounds like a song you might be writing. But here's the thing. This very well could be a woman, by the way, a female.
Yes. And I'm kind of talking from the male perspective, because I'm a male.
Yeah.
And as I was wondering, like, well, what's different it's actually not. I don't think it's any different.
Yeah.
I think it's the same.
No, it's very much different. And that's the real reason you're talking and you're classifying, I guess, contextualizing this from the male perspective is because to do so from a female perspective would put their behavior on blast. It will put their behavior, it will put a female way of thinking when it comes to vetting guys. It would actually put the burden of the male definition of responsibility on a woman. Because again, responsibility is something, respect and responsibility, I should say, are gendered. What we expect from women, the responsibilities that we expect from women are nothing like we expect from men. You will not see shows, certainly not by TradCon personalities. And I'm not saying even Jocko is really one of these guys, but maybe he is. You will not see the same standard of justice or the same standard or expectations of responsibility for women. That's why it's difficult. That's why we have to dance around this. We have to dance around the idea that we might in fact, we're so sketchy about this whole thing that we have to dance around the idea that by describing what Jocko is describing right now in male terms, there might be a parallel. There might be a contrast for women. Oh my God, we can't do that. We don't want to step on their feelings because we're not supposed to be judgmental.
A woman should do the same thing. Look, if the relationship is worth it and it's meant to be, and I hate to say that because it sounds super cheesy, but if it's meant to be, you'll be good.
And that's like a big thing that goes along with your data point theory, hypothesis, whatever. Is like, because the big thing, and let's face it, we know a lot of Navy SEALs, and there seems to be, I don't know.
They get one data point, they're going.
And here's the thing. No, they get a bunch. The ones I've known, anyway. Yeah. Some of the ones I know. They get a bunch of data points, and a lot of them are red flags. But they seem to just, bypass those red flags and just look at maybe the one or two good data points or whatever, and then they base the future on that or whatever.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's a good addition to my comment.
Yeah.
I do like what he just said right there. I do like the idea that men in general, especially a lot of guys will turn around and try to, recuperate something or try to, in some way, maybe even punish a woman. Oh, well, you weren't what I wanted, right? But you could be if you would just shape up, kind of thing. You're looking back. That's a kind of part, anyways, of the definition of Iron Rule of Tomasi number 7, which is never root through garbage once you've taken that garbage to the trash or to the curb. Because what you thought was valuable is never what you thought it was. And people see you doing it and it looks terrible because it seems like you're sort of capitulating to whatever was going on. And then whatever was wrong, or maybe it was just simply the red flags. Maybe the red flags that you drag the trash can to the curb for, later on you go, well, maybe that red flag, maybe I should cut her some slack. Maybe things aren't as bad as I thought. Man, I wouldn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. They're right about that. Guys will definitely do that when they get in that situation, for sure. And then there's the idea of once you have those like one or two data points, or once you have one or two criteria met for men, and I have to also reiterate this, is that the prerequisites for intimacy, for relationship, for sex, for whatever, any kind of sort of interpersonal relationship, let's just say between men and women, men have a much lower threshold of standards. I get in trouble for saying this all the time, but I mean, they're basically making my point for me here, which is men do not have an attraction floor. Women do have an attraction floor. That's one of the founding principles of hypergamy. Hypergamy does not seek its own level. It's always looking at or above its own level. And again, comes back to the idea of masculine, quote unquote, masculine responsibility. Well, you didn't live up to mama's expectations. If mama ain't happy, nobody's happy, right? So when you hear that, you should have saw these signs. Well, why did you marry her? Well, she was a hot piece of ass and she was fun in bed. Oh, okay. Well, so that was it, right? Yeah, pretty much, because those of the standards that most men will even like allow themselves to have, because we're told that we're never supposed to have any standards. We're not supposed to be discerning. We're not supposed to be judgmental. You don't know if she had a bad day. You don't know if she's had a rough life. She's a woman. Lift her up, support her, be her rock. Okay. Well, what do I get to do? What are my criteria? You know, good looking and available. Say unlimited access to unlimited sexuality, right? She's got to be hot and she's got to be available. Those are basically the two criteria. Those are the two data points most guys are looking for. And yes, you're right. That does get them into trouble. But we also have to look at the fact that anything beyond that, hell, even just looking for a good looking woman, even that is something we won't allow most guys to have as a criteria. We're just fortunate to have, I don't know, the gods smile upon us and have the clouds part and the angels sing and the light shine down. And suddenly there she is across the high school gymnasium at the dance. And suddenly it was meant to be, right? Well, that's your standard. The standard for the guys, if that happens, if that happens and the light shines down, that's the only criteria that you should really have, because we're supposed to follow our hearts, right? We're supposed to like trust in our emotions. We're not supposed to think. And that's the thing that gets me about the whole idea of vetting and the whole idea of red flags is we're supposed to we tell guys to look past those. We tell them, hell, the whole reason, or I would say one of the main reasons anyways, for the body fat acceptance movement right now is to remove one of the one remaining of the two criteria that guys have when it comes to wanting to get with a woman. I want a woman who's good looking. She's got to have a flat stomach. She's got to have big boobs. She's got to have long hair. You know, she's got to at least in some way be femininely arousing for me to want to get with her. How dare you? Women are beautiful at any size, right? So we hear that over and over and over again. Okay, well, I didn't know she was going to get fat, Jocko. But I really want to divorce her now, but I can't because I got a kid with her now. And well, you keep telling me I need to man up and take responsibility, but well, you just should have got with a different girl. You got with the wrong girl. She wasn't a quality woman. Well, she seemed like it at the time, but I was told that I'm not supposed to want hot, thin, skinny girls with big boobs. I'm supposed to want a girl who's beautiful on the inside, right? That's all my criteria. The only criteria that a man is allowed to have, we just etch away at it. I mean, maybe the fact that she's available, right? So it's like sexy, hot, and available. So now she doesn't even have to be sexy and hot. It's just available. And they can't disagree with that, right? You can't say, well, she's taken by another guy. So, okay, there's my standard. I don't want that. But that's really what it boils down to, is removing any kind of standard, anything on the prerequisite list. Because when we look at a gynocentric social order, or a social order that is rooted, the authority of that social order is rooted in satisfying the female mating strategy, that's what you're going to get. These are the narratives you're going to get. And we can analyze this. We've been doing this for 20 years in the manosphere. We can look at it and we get called misogynists for doing so. We look at it and we say, oh, you guys, who hurt you? You're an incel. And who would want to have sex with you anyways? You don't know what you're talking about. So really the only person who knows what they're talking about, who has any capacity for critical thinking, is the guy who's getting laid like tile. That's basically the bonehead, sophomoric logic that we're supposed to wrap our heads around, I guess, somehow. And so when we look at the red flags and we look at these guys who are just sort of, either blundering through life or whatever else, we want to cut them some slack, but we can't, because to do so would make us look bad. It would make us look like we're not doing the work, or we're encouraging other guys not to do the work, or we're encouraging other guys to even pretend, or even God forbid you complain. One of the most viewed videos I've done on my clips channel right now is or the shorts. One of my shorts on this channel, as a matter of fact, was a very brief clip that I think I pulled out of a Fresh and Fit video of me, and I was talking about how men are not allowed to be victims. Only women are allowed to be victims. Men are never allowed to be victims of anything. And even if you are a victim, you're not supposed to talk about it. You're just you're taking on chin. Oh, it's okay. I'll pull myself up on my bootstraps and I'll be good. But then in the next breath, we're going to say, well, you need to talk about your feelings. Oh, men are killing themselves. If they would just have more friends, if they just express themselves and talk about it and everything else. But yet the other narrative before we get to that point where we're suicidal is we're supposed to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We're supposed to be responsible. We're never supposed to be victims. And I'm still not, I'm not saying you should think of yourself that way. But that's the narrative. That's what we expect from a guy who is respectable. So a guy who has integrity, it's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get back up, right? Okay, great. But we are never allowed to be victims. Only women are allowed to be victims because they are the vulnerable sex. So let's continue a little bit further.
Gather more data points and read them and utilize them in the calculus of your forward movement. Yeah. Because you're right. I've seen some of my friends, man, you see mega red flag data points. There's one awesome data point, which is, oh, she's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's the data point.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other data point is she's psychotic.
Yes.
She is an alcoholic. She is from a insane background. Her environment is crazy. And what's the guy think?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm going to marry her.
Oh, yeah, exciting. You meet a hot girl and they're super hot and they're impressed that you're a Navy SEAL. Right. We're kind of going.
All right. He goes off a little bit off track here. I'll come back to this part, but he's not wrong. A lot of guys will do exactly that. They'll ignore borderline. Hell no. I'm guilty as charged. He'll ignore real psychological disorders as a result. It takes some time to really sort of understand that. Like what was it? Good judgment comes from bad experiences or bad decisions, and that bad decisions are what create bad experiences, so that you can later on have good judgment. And that's the whole thing. Is most guys won't really. I can tell you this. Jocko can tell you this. Rich Cooper can tell you this. We can tell you, hey, watch out for those red flags, man. How do you not see this? And we get insulted, especially I think a lot of red pill guys who've been red pill for a long time, have been red pill aware. Maybe they're black pill, maybe they're doomers, maybe they're MGTOW, maybe they're, select your tribe or your brand, whatever it is. But I think we get a little jaded as red pill aware guys. And I've done it myself too. But I think a lot of guys who are a little more practical minded, I think this grates on them a little bit more than most other guys. And that is when they see a blue pill guy make a rookie mistake. When they see a guy who is he's just the sniveling beta, and you can't even believe he actually got lucky enough to get with the girl, right? To even have a girl give him especially a good looking girl, give him the time of day. And yet the guy simps. Or we'll look at, here's a great one. A great example of this is OnlyFans. I mean, it's just sort of came to the surface during 2020 when OnlyFans started becoming national headlines, right? Well, you don't be a simp. Hell, we wouldn't even know what the word simp was if it weren't for that behavior. And so when we've been seeing this, the word simp and the idea of a guy who's just sort of this average frustrated chump has been around for a long time. We just call it something different. It's been around. But most red pill guys who at least have red pill awareness, whatever franchise you subscribe to, you'll look at these guys and you go, who would do that? I'll get run up the flagpole for doing shows about incels or doing shows about OnlyFans or doing shows about beta blue pill behavior, so that I can call it out, so that guys can have, men who aren't red pill aware can understand what the principles are. Very simple. Red pill 101. Thank you, Pat Campbell. Well, that gets pretty frustrating for guys. Who cares? Who cares? Who cares about that? Who cares? Who doesn't know that? I knew that. I'm too cool for this show. Goodbye. I unsubscribed. Well, there are guys that don't. There's lots of, in fact, I would argue there are more guys who don't know this stuff that you are too cool to stick around for and maybe even learn a little something from, than there are guys who are just I never knew that for. Thank you for saving my life. I was about to walk into the lion's den. Oh my God. Thank you, Jocko. Thank you, Rollo. Thank you, whoever. Jocko and Rollo. Rollo, Jocko, Rollo. Thank you for helping me out. Yeah. It needs to be said. Sometimes a remedial lesson of the red pill is probably the best medicine you can get a hold of. So don't hate on the beta. Don't hate on the guy who's the blue pill guy. I don't hate blue pill guy. I don't hate any guys. I mean, there are very few people that I have some sort of contempt for, and those are the people who kind of screw me. But it's certainly not the guys who are incels. It's certainly not the guys who are, like maybe the sort of the more simpier end of MGTOW or doomers or nihilists, whatever. I don't even know what the hell to call them right now. I hate you. I just want you to learn the lesson. I just want you to get classes in session, and I hope you would learn something from all of this. So but to call these guys and say, well, who doesn't know that? You should have been more responsible. You're relying on old order rationales to explain a new order phenomenon. Here's what's going on right now. Here's what's happening to you. Here's what's going to happen to you. I was watching that one show, and I will probably do a video on this. I'm kind of waiting for my moment. But yes, I saw DJ Academics do his breakdown or do his video with Brittany Renner. And Brittany Renner is insane, clinically diagnostically belongs in an institution. And I don't say that lightly. It's not like, she's so crazy. That's not what I mean. She is there is literally something wrong with her. If you look at any video, you look at that video, there is something wrong with her. So what do we say? On every damn video that talks about PJ Washington, Mary wifing her up and at 23 years old, she's 29, by the way, Epiphany phase, hello. Yeah, she's got her baby. She's got her baby daddy. She has everything she ever stated prior to all this that she wanted. She wanted to marry a dumb athlete with a lot of money and then divorce him. Congratulations, PJ. So what do? We don't point fingers at her. In fact, we're very, very reluctant to call her crazy. We're very reluctant to do that. But we sure as hell will call PJ Washington an idiot for ever having gotten himself involved in all of that craziness. We will definitely run him up the flagpole. We won't point out her completely, and I don't use this term lightly, her completely evil way of thinking about what she's, and the only reason I use that term evil is because a child has been produced as a result of that. That's why. It's deliberate evil. But we're not gonna, and it's not so much like women will, and I understand this, so don't at me. I understand women will say, well, she's just a hoe. She's just, she's a gold digger. She's a skank. There's something wrong with her. But like other women will, I realize she's getting criticized from other women right now, but you won't see that from guys. Abba and Preach sure the hell didn't do that. DJ Academics, at least he had the balls to bring her on and sort of like confront her with it, but he did nothing to hold her accountable. Not really anyways. I know he did a little bit, but she was put on the spot, and you see that crazy come out. But it's far. Look how many videos there are of holding, quote unquote, holding PJ Washington accountable or responsible, or you shouldn't have. She was the wrong girl. How can you not have seen that? Any fool could have seen that. While he's trying to be a professional basketball player in the NBA, right? Staying on his mission. But we don't, it's much easier to criticize PJ Washington than it is to criticize Brittany Renner. Why? Because she has the vagina. Because she's part of the sisterhood. And even if it's not, even if you can say, okay, well, in this individual case, we're going to hold her accountable. In this individual case, we're going to say, that's evil, that's wrong, she's a nutcase. But not all women are like that, right? And Nawalt, not all women are like her. We'll find some way to sort of march it back. We'll find some way to sort of like soften the blow, because by doing so, by holding a woman accountable, and this is on any show or anyone, not just Brittany Renner, but by holding that woman accountable, saying she should have been more responsible, what that's saying is womankind should be. It doesn't matter, because what women will do is they will always take their own individual experience and try to make it the cosmically universal experience. Oh, as a woman, you will hear women say that. You can read this in any tweet. You'll see there will probably be comments to this video where women will come in and chime in and say, well, I'm a woman, and as a woman, I fill in the blank, whatever. Whenever you hear that, whenever that's the pretext to a comment, or when somebody's going to tell you something on a talk show or something, as a woman, speaking as a woman, we get that. We can see, or generally we can see that you're a woman. But if it's an imperative for women to believe that their individual experience defines the global experience for all women. Men pick up on that as well. That's why we march it back. That's why it's much easier to run PJ Washington up the flagpole than it is to run Brittany Renner up, because Brittany Renner is a representative of the sisterhood uber alles. That's why we won't do that. So that's the Jocko Willink. There's some other good spots in this too. It's about a 10-minute video. I will give you the link to this for the full video here. I've only gone through like about half of it. I do want to get into one other video here, which is
in 1 month, I will celebrate my 10th anniversary with my wife. So far, I must give the marriage experience 5 stars out of 5. I must, because my wife might listen to this, but also because it's actually true. You know, I had the good fortune of marrying a woman who's caring, faithful, intelligent, talented, good mother, nurturing, joyful, loving. She also believes in me and supports me in my ambitions. And that's one of those qualities in a wife that a man kind of takes for granted if he has it, until he realizes that lots of men end up in marriages with women who doubt them, cut them down, belittle their dreams. I've never had to worry about that with my wife, which is a good thing, because as you've noticed, I come up with some pretty weird schemes sometimes, and she's almost always game for it. In fact, sometimes she's the one suggesting the weird schemes and things I should do. All of these are positive qualities, and on top of it all, I must say that my wife is actually also really hot, which frankly is a huge bonus. Now, if you're looking at me and wondering how I managed to land somebody with all of those qualities, I have no answer for you. I'm just as perplexed as you are.
all right. Let's just hold our horses here, Matt. Now, in the first, let's see, how many minutes was this? Then the first 1 minute and 6 seconds, Matt has fallen into the most common trap that most tradcon, and I hate to say evangelical Christian guys, which I know that's what he is, but most sort of good, upstanding traditional conservative men will do. They must become less, so she becomes more. And I love how he mentions a few things about, like, you know, there's some guys who don't have women that are as supporting and gorgeous and, you know, pretty hot, like my pastor's wife, pretty hot, right? The idea is that self-deprecation will in some way make that woman, your wife, especially your wife, more appreciative of you. Stop doing that. Stop it. Stop self-deprecating traditional man. Stop self-deprecating evangelical Christian guy or whatever you are. Stop doing that. It's not the win you think it is. I've taught once again. Thank you, Pat Campbell. I've done this show. I've talked about this topic several times. You do yourself no favor by self-deprecating. That's not to say you don't laugh at yourself, whatever. What it is that's your default response. Self-deprecation. Stop it. Most guys, when they do that, they believe that, oh, well, I can't believe my luck. I can't believe that you know, it must be a God thing because, you know, I'm a schmuck and there's no way I could ever get a girl like this if it wasn't some sort of act of divine intervention. So here we are. Let me introduce you to the little lady, and she's still kind of hot. No. And she supports me. Well, yeah. Okay. You know why? Like he says, well, most guys take that for granted. I don't think so. I don't think so whatsoever, because that's the way it should be, Matt. That shouldn't be a rare. It shouldn't be a rare quality in the woman who's decided to spend the rest of her life with you. In fact, you want to talk about data points that Jocko was talking about a minute ago? That should be one of them. So rather than say, and I granted, yes, it is very rare, so maybe it is something you should appreciate, but guess what? If you are making the sacrifice, and it is a very great sacrifice to be married to a woman in this day and age in a Western culture with all the downside effects that entails, at least you can expect something like that. Please expect that. Gentlemen, if you find yourself self-deprecating when you're introducing your wife, when you're introducing your girlfriend, I don't care, whoever, like you could be yourself, whatever. Stop making yourself less to make her more. Stop it. All it does is make her go, oh, That's an insult. You are insulting your wife when you do that. Because women's egos are associated to the type or the value of the man that they can get with. And if you clarify in no uncertain terms that she is better than you, that you can't believe that a schmuck like you, a lowlife like you, would ever have a princess or queen like her lower herself to your level to get with you, that's an insult to her ego, because she married you because she thought you were better than what she would realistically get. That's why. That's the whole basis of hypergamy. Never seeks its own level, always looks higher. When you're the guy that she'd settled on and committed to, and you say, actually, I'm not higher than you. I'm actually a step lower than you. I'm the lowest step because you're so great. You're so beautiful. If that's you, you've essentially shot yourself in the foot in terms of hypergamous evaluation, especially for a woman who's decided to spend the rest of her life with you. Stop it. If anything, get cocky about it. Now, here's my wife. She's lucky to have me. How easy is that? Start the conversation like that. I'm such a badass, and she's a badass too because she got with a guy like me. Oh man, he must have a big dick. Right? Well, there it is. Do that, and I guarantee you will have the effect that you're trying to get by self-deprecation.
But it's just one of the reasons why I thank God every day that I am married. And another reason is that being married means I'm not involved in a dating scene today, which is great because that scene is abysmal in every conceivable way.
Okay. It's great because, Matt, you would you would 100% likely be in the 80%ers who are below average. You would not be selected on Tinder. You would not be selected on Hinge. You would not be selected on Bumble. You would be lucky to be Christian Mingle, maybe. and based probably primarily on the fact that you're on Daily Wire or whatever it is that you're on here. I'm not trying to be an asshole or anything like that. I'm just saying in today's sexual marketplace, you would be opted out. You would be selected out. You would be one of the bajillions of guys who are trying to get with the very small percentage of women that are actually on those. So yeah, thank God you aren't, because you're out of that, and thank God you met your wife prior to all of this stuff. And you better mind your P's and Q's, because if you don't, well, they're going to throw you back into that shit stew.
Now, dating was not easy a decade ago when I was still in the game, but it was a walk in the park compared to the situation today. It's probably never been more difficult in modern American history anyway for a single person to find the right match. And that may seem paradoxical because it's also true that single people have never had more choices. And that's exactly the problem. Case in point, a recent article on the website studyfinds.org about dating apps and how people use them. And this is important because almost all single people today use dating apps. Tinder alone has 57 million users.
All right. Let me just add a little data point here real quickly. We live in a time where women have never had as much choice as they do now. Men, on the other hand, look at the data sets. Really, Matt, seriously, I cover this all the time in the manosphere. When you look, you don't even have to do it in the manosphere. You can look it up on OkCupid. You can look it up on Tinder. You can look it on Pornhub. You probably won't go look there, but if you go and you look at the stats of the guys, the gender difference between who responds to who, the ratio of men responding to women is something like 100 or maybe even more than that to 1. In fact, they've done stuff like women have done studies or have done their own studies where they pose as a man on Tinder and to see what a man's experience is like. It's like being ahead of you're one sheep in the herd. So yeah, there's choice. There's definitely a choice addiction. There's a choice paradox in all this, but it ain't for men.
That's just one app. Overall, about 50% of the population consists of single adults, which is a staggeringly high number as marriage rates continue to plummet.
Yeah, 6 point.
And about 40% of adults use online dating. So you connect the dots there. Granted, unfortunately, not all of those online daters are actually single, but we can hopefully assume that the vast majority are. So what is the actual experience of using these apps? How do people use them? Here's what the article says. says online dating became a way of life for millions of singles during the coronavirus pandemic. Dating apps like Match.com, Tinder, and OkCupid are responsible for 10% of the long-lasting adult relationships in America, which is actually pretty low considering how many people use these apps. And as it turns out, these daters aren't wasting time when it comes to choosing who to swipe right on. A recent study shows that users know within a second whether or not to express interest in someone else. So what makes someone choose to make the move on a profile? Researchers say it comes down to judging the book by its cover. The attractiveness of a person is primarily what compels another to swipe right, the study finds. Within a split second, the user determines whether or not they will accept a date based on appearance and even race. Now, there's nothing new or scandalous about people choosing mates based first on appearance. Appearance is important, and it's not a
Okay, let's clarify terms once again, Matt. Who are the primary people that are using? What gender uses Tinder? What gender uses these quote unquote dating apps the most? Who does the picking? Who does the swiping? Who does the rule making apply to? Mostly women. They're the ones who are doing the selection. The vast majority of the people who are using it are men. So when it comes to the selection, the selectivity process, the people who are judging a book by the cover, those people have vaginas primarily. They're the ones who are doing on Hinge and Bumble. They are definitely 100% the ones doing the swiping based on nothing but looks, Matt. So keep that in mind. Maybe you weren't aware of that. I love, again, how do we keep this as gender neutral as possible? People. The idea, you would never get from anything he's going to say in this video, you would never get anything to the effect that it is what the gender skew is in all of this. You will never get that, because to do so would be seemingly judgmental of women. And it would mean that men would also have to be responsible for vetting those women who are doing the swiping based solely on how the book looks, the cover of the book looks. We won't talk about those things. We don't want to talk about those things, because to do so would be to admit to an unflattering truth about women's nature. You will never see this happen. You will never see a burden of responsibility for female choice, which is what this really is. Largely. Hinge, Bumble, definitely. Tinder, yeah, largely, mostly.
Small or irrelevant detail. Yeah, they say don't judge a book by its cover, but the thing about a book is that you don't have to see the cover while you're reading it. You open the cover and that's it. As for someone you're dating or married to, you have to look at that cover every day. So it's good if you find it appealing. My wife has already outlined, has many wonderful qualities, but I never would have learned about those qualities if I didn't find her attractive. When you first meet someone, you aren't going to know about their deeper, truer selves, and whatever character traits, good or bad, may be lying under the surface. Those things come out in time. It doesn't take a long time, but it does take time. Initially, you're going to be making more surface level judgments to decide if it's worth investing that time. So that's not in itself the problem here.
No, that is the problem. According to Jocko, it is the primary problem. You're supposed to be able to see that there is a lion in the cave, remember? And there's lion scat around the cave before you go into the cave. You're supposed to be getting those data points. Well, at least Matt is smart enough to point out the fact that, yeah, you have to actually be and get into a relationship in the first place so that you can figure out that, oh my God, this is a lion in the first place. So there's the process. Now, I don't know anything about Jocko's personal life or anything like that. I know he's married, but I don't know for how long. I don't know. But I do know this, is both Jocko and Matt himself are using old order understandings of intersexual dynamics that are no longer in play, that are completely obsolete. Now, have men and women's natures changed at all? No, primarily no. The evolved nature, certainly not. But what we expect, what we think should happen between men and women, that has dramatically changed over the course of certainly just the last 20 years, the beginning of the 21st century for sure, with the advent of social media, with the advent of the ease with which we have choice, as Matt has eloquently pointed out for us here. So yeah, the problem is you're still thinking that the ideal arrangement, the ideal way that this should happen is in the 20th century, is back in the 90s, back in the 80s, back in the 50s, back in the 40, back in the World War II era. It'd be so much greater if we could all just go back to that, because that would be a great thing. You're not going back to that. The nature hasn't changed, but the interaction and the context has most definitely changed, and you need to change with it.
The problem is the sheer number of choices and how quickly the dating app user has been conditioned to swipe through them.
No, Matt. The dating app user who is doing the swiping is the woman, is the female, the one doing the choosing. Look at the numbers. Look at the gendered difference between how many men are on these dating sites, which I love how he doesn't mention them by name. The person doing the swiping is primarily the female.
The problem is also the very act of swiping, I think. There's something about swiping through just doing this, through a series of human faces that makes the whole exercise somewhat dystopian and
If it were, Matt, if it were only faces, it wouldn't be funny. It would not be funny.
Humanizing. Yes, the cover on the book matters. Yes, physical attraction matters, is important. But these days, people are reduced to just a postage stamp sized picture on a phone, and potential matches will give them all of 1 second before deciding whether to relegate them to the junk folder. It's
right, which is why 80% of men are rated as below average in looks.
It's quite degrading. Not to mention fruitless. Because there are so many people on these apps, and because they're designed in such a way to encourage these split-second decisions.
True.
All that means is that you have to browse through an enormous number of potential matches. An article in Mashable a couple of years ago, quoting the editor of a trade publication called Global Dating Insights, says that the average dating site user has to swipe through 7,500 profiles before having a meaningful interaction. Now that's...
Again, who's doing the swiping, and who are the 7,500 who get swiped? What is the gender difference in that, Matt?
Not 7,500 before finding a girlfriend or boyfriend. That's just the amount of swiping needed to even have a meaningful human interaction with a person. And worst of all, because these apps require almost no effort and no investment and no energy to use, they only encourage more of the sort of meandering unseriousness that has already made the dating scene difficult and had made it difficult when I was single a decade ago.
All right. So once again, we're going to look at intersexual dynamics. We're going to look at the nature of men. We're going to look at the nature of women. We have to look at men and women's mating strategies. It's very easy. And this is I don't know if you guys are picking up on this, but again, this is Matt Walsh contextualizing the sexual marketplace from primarily a male perspective, right? Well, we shouldn't just judge a book by the cover. It's like, we want a woman who's good looking. Oh, we want a person who's good looking, because we don't get our foot in the door if that's not the case. Well, yeah, that's pretty much what those apps are for. That was the whole point of Tinder. Actually, Tinder is really from Grindr, which was a homosexual hookup app prior to Tinder becoming very popular. Yeah, it was meant to facilitate hookups, Matt. Maybe we're using it for something different than what it was originally, intended for, but that it is what it is. That was primarily what we're using it for, based solely on how hot you are. And by the way, yes, that's not low investment. It's very high investment. Trust me. High investment in personal investment, high investment in emotionalism, high investment in trying to tune your pictures to the point, and your game and whatever else it is when you're trying to work, say, seeking arrangements, or you start trying to work, Tinder, you're trying to work Hinge or Bumble or whatever else. There's a lot of investment in that. In fact, there are gurus, and I know a few of them, who will sell you a program as to how to best maximize the brand management that dating has become online now. You can buy an agent, a brand agent, so that you don't need a matchmaker anymore. You need a guy who can say, okay, that picture sucks and that picture doesn't. Hell, there's algorithm. There's I forget the name of the site, but there's actually a site that will judge or rate your picture. Hell, when you go and you see Fresh and Fit do Smash or Pass, that's exactly what's going on. That's the reality of this situation. Stop trying to force fit the reality of the 21st century into the box of the old order way of thinking in the 20th century. And stop holding men so responsible for those decisions, for those bad decisions. They're trying to figure it out just as well as you are, and you are not helping the situation. Tradcon guys.
Swiping left and swiping right becomes more of a game, an end in and of itself. And the people who are on these apps actually looking for meaningful interactions, for relationship, for commitment, have to somehow sort through this sea of people who only want to hook up, or maybe don't even want that. Maybe they want to keep swiping and have no real deep interest in human relationships at all. Perhaps because they feel that their porn habit takes care of those needs.
Yeah, who would that be? Perhaps those people feel that their porn habit is going to satisfy their sexual urges, and that this is they're just game players. Matt, just say dudes, okay? Just say guys, because we know who has the quote unquote porn habit. But we're going to listen to this for a long time in the month of November. I'm going to talk about that with Sterling Cooper. Matt, start talking. So use the male, use the masculine here. Okay. Look at who's making these decisions. Look at who's doing the swiping. Most guys, they're not going to, guys who are playing games, guys who care about this kind of stuff, guys who are looking for a meaningful connection with a person, they're not on Tinder. They're on OnlyFans, because that girl's pretending to be that guy's boyfriend or the guy's girlfriend. That's where those guys that you're worried about and their porn addiction, they're not on Tinder. It's women who are doing the swiping, man. On OnlyFans, those girls that are making money well, not all of them, but the ones that are the top earners, they're the ones that are pretending to be the virtual girlfriend of the guys that you're worried about right here. And you should just say, guys, perhaps you think that it's your porn habit that's satisfying your need for human interaction. No, that's OnlyFans. We got another app for that, Matt.
It's instructive that even the words boyfriend, girlfriend, and dating aren't as common as they once were. Instead of saying, I'm dating this person, you'll hear people say things like, well, we're talking.
No.
Someone said to me recently, when referring to the person that we would have once called his girlfriend, he said, yeah, I've been talking to this girl for 6 months. 6 months? And that's how you describe it? Just talking?
Yeah. I agree with you there, Matt. You should be banging her like way before 6 months. But again, and the reason for that is because the internet is a digital buffer. It's a buffer against rejection. Yeah, he's talking. Yeah, you know who he's talking to? His OnlyFans girl. That's who he's saying. You should, Matt, here's an experiment. Go ask your friend who's just been talking to the girl for 6 months what her OnlyFans site is. Go ask your friend how much he spends tipping her for any kind of just little scraps of attention. Look into that before we start like digging into all it. Beating around the bush and not gendering this whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous, because to do so would step on the little girl's feet. It would be damaging to the female narrative that traditional conservatives do not want to identify. They don't want to talk about it, because in doing so, they would have to address it. As I said before, responsibility without authority is slavery. Thank you, turd flinging monkey. I give credit where it's due, but it's true. If you're going to hold men responsible, if you think that that's going to solve everything, or get them out of their porn habits or whatever it is, first off, they have to have the authority. And the only way you are going to reauthorize men or give a hand in any way, at least they're not going to give it to them, but the only way you can push them in that direction is if you're willing to hold women responsible as well. And you know where that starts? That starts by gendering conversations just like the one we're having here right now. That starts gendering. You're going to do a whole video, 5-6 minute video dedicated to this. Tell them the truth. Tell them the whole goddamn truth. Because if you don't, you're part of the problem.
You haven't even graduated to any kind of actual human relationship yet?
And what would that
After 6 months of dating my wife, at that point I was calling her my fiance because we were engaged. Fear of commitment, passivity, men who will not take the lead in their relationships.
Okay. It's not a fear of commitment. That's another trope. Men do not fear commitment. Men take on more commitment than women do today. Men will take on more commitment when it comes to school, when it comes to the military, when it comes to their family, when it comes to a job, when it comes to a business, when it comes to name the commitment. The only time we talk about a fear of commitment is when it's in the female context. Oh, they won't commit to a woman, so therefore they're committophobes. No, you don't recognize the fact that he's spending X amount. He's committed to the U.S. military. He's committed to his business. He's committed to taking care of his sick mom. He's committed to, his family. He's committed to the little league team. Who knows? We won't recognize that commitment, but we will recognize the fact that he won't be committed to her. Maybe he's getting more data points. Maybe men need to do that because today, as you just pointed out, it's a really hectic market out there, and you got to be 100% sure. In fact, I would be less worried about a guy committing than I would be about him the reasons why he's not committing.
Single people kind of meandering along, floating on the tide, dating for no particular reason with no end goal in mind, too afraid to even call it dating. All of these have been major problems for years. They've been problems increasingly ever since we came up with the idea of dating to supplant the idea of courtship. That's really what.
Okay, now we get back to old order thinking again. Stop calling it courtship. Stop it. The reason why you even have that word in your vocabulary is because of courtly love, is because of the romantic ideal, because of chivalry 1.0, well, actually 2.0. Because your misguided, romanticized ideas about what chivalry should be, about what courting should be, the appropriate way to do those things. And those ideas came from 13th century Western Europe, from the aristocracy of that time. Courtly love, look it up. Stop thinking of it in those terms. That is old order thinking. I'm not saying that there couldn't be a better way for us to engage with one another and to find love and to form families. I'm not saying that there's maybe not a better way, but I will tell you this: that better way is not in the 13th century. Stop calling it courting. Start looking at it. I would almost go with Jocko's suggestion before I would go with Matt's. Oh, we need to get back to what really is a deficit in courting. As nice as it would be to think that you could do that, as nice as it would be to think that we could go back to happy days in the 1950s at the sock hop. Monday, Sunday, happy days. Like, you're not going back to that. That kind of dating, Brady Bunch dating, doesn't exist anymore. Find a better way forward. Yes, absolutely. But stop calling it courting and stop thinking that you're going to go back to an old order romantic ideal that died in 1986. Stop it.
When the train went off the rails, the dating apps have only, as I said, made all of this worse. They've poured fuel on that fire, though I'm not sure that fire.
The dating apps have only met a demand that was already there, Matt. Oops.
Graduated to any kind of actual human relation problems for years. They've been problems increasingly ever since we came up with the idea of dating to supplant the idea of courtship. That's really when the train went off the rails. The dating apps have only, as I said, made all of this worse. They've poured fuel on that fire, though I'm not sure that fire is the right analogy here, because that evokes something that's burning hot with passion and intensity. But passion and intensity are the opposite of what most single people encounter out in the dating world right now. And that is why the dating apps, at least the swiping dating apps today, are canceled. Hey, listen.
That's enough of that. No, Matt, there's probably a lot more hot, passionate sex going on than you're willing to acknowledge. Because generally speaking, from the position of, say, Hinge or Bumble, certainly those two apps, but Tinder for sure. Go look at the data from the general survey study from 2018 and 2019, and look at the data. So I've done several shows on this. Go look at those. Yeah, sex is definitely happening for women, not for guys, for women, but it's the men that we're trying to hold responsible. It's the men that we want to say it's your fault. You have a porn addiction. You have a video game addiction. You have this addiction. You have that addiction. You're not like me. You're not cool like me. You're not cool and married like me. I've been married for 25 years. Thank you very much, Matt. But you're not cool like you because you're 10 years in. Jocko, God knows how long he's been married. We don't have I'll be the first to admit, we don't have an understanding of this. We don't, because we're certainly not a firsthand understanding of it. I do, in a sense that I know a lot of people who are in it. From a third party, I think I'm pretty well versed in what's going on. But I'm also realistic when it comes to why men and women are on these apps in the first place. Those apps are meeting a physical, evolved need, mental demand. And so to say, well, more men would get married. Really, without saying it, say it without saying it. Really, what he's saying is men need to man up and get off these apps and start courting women in the old-fashioned way, so that we can get back to the good old days, back to happy days again. Give up your porn addiction. Give up your video games. Man up. Be a better. Again, you can't argue with that message. Like, do the work. Okay, be a better guy. Good. What are you doing it for? Well, I want to be a good husband when I finally meet the one. Well, then we got a problem. It's not about masculine empowerment. It's not about the power dynamic. It's not about becoming the best version of yourself, which I've heard a bazillion times now. It's not about doing the work. It's not about any of that. It's about what it is. What is your nature? What is your evolved purpose? What is your direction there? Is it good to do all that stuff? Absolutely. Be the best that you can be. I would never say anything against that. But when that is weaponized against guys for not following an old order way of thinking, that's when I have a problem with it. When we see all these horrible problems. We see, the marriage rates in the toilet. We see not enough fathers, being involved with their kids, which is nonsense, by the way, statistically nonsense. We see all of this, these same old order tropes, these same old order reasons for this. Men need to be more responsible. Men need to do this. Men need to do that. Blah, blah, blah. But if we're only looking at it from one side, and it's easier to point at men because men are supposed to be responsible. We're supposed to sacrifice. To be a man is to sacrifice. Pick up my fourth book, which is The Rational Male Religion, available now on Audible, which is this book right here. In there, I speak about exactly this. Men have been defined by their sacrifices. We are the disposable sex, evolutionarily speaking. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that that's what it is. We have a burden of performance. To be a respectable man is to do something, to have honor, to be respectable, to take responsibility, to be a protector, a provider, a father, right? Be parentally invested, right? And yet we see women's nature being unfettered over the past 60 some odd years. And we look at what's going on as far as our marriage rates are concerned, as far as family creation is concerned, as far as like fertility rates are concerned. And you know where we go? We don't go at the women. We don't point at them. We don't say, it's you who are doing this. Why? We don't say that. We call them people. We want to generalize that as much as we possibly can. We don't in any way want to offend the sisterhood. Because for the last 65, 70 some odd years, we've been conditioned by a blue pill dynamic, by a blue pill conditioning to not to default to self-deprecation like he does in the beginning here. That's really the point, is the mindset. The mindset is, this is what I think should be work. It should be this way. Men should be responsible. So, and men are more empowered. Men have more power than women. So therefore, it's their responsibility to, course correct. No, Matt, you need to look at women. No, Matt, you need to look at the difference between responsibility and authority. Sorry, Jocko. It's nice to see those. It's nice to see all that, those data sets. It's nice to see, you're looking for little data points. But the reason why guys are not vetting isn't because they're dumb. It's because they're necessitous, and they're in a gynocentric social order that has made them even more necessitous, because all we do is put the power of choice in the hands of women. It's not in men's, at least in this dimension. It's not. We live in Sadie Hawkins' world. Do you know what Sadie Hawkins is? You ever been to a Sadie Hawkins dance when you were in middle school? It's supposed to be some sort of gender bender, right? Is swap the genders. So instead of the regular Happy Days sock hop dance where the guy asks Susie out, Sadie has to ask the guy out. And that's where we live right now, ideally is what they would like us to live in, is Sadie Hawkins' world, where men just line up, okay, and that guy will do and that guy won't. 80% of you go and 20% of you stay. Statistically speaking, evolutionarily speaking, Darwinistically, that is the truth. And until you accept that we live in Sadie Hawkins' world now, where the little girls go and ask the boys out to this high school dance, you know what happens at the end of that? You know what happens in a say? You know why they canceled Sadie Hawkins dances? I don't know, maybe they still do, but probably not anymore. It's not as novel an idea anymore, because all the girls will go and ask the cutest boy out, and it can only be one boy and one girl at the dance. So the cutest girl asks the cutest boy out. He says yes, and they go to the dance. Meanwhile, the other girls who don't want to go with those other schlubs sit home and grind their teeth. And the boys who didn't get selected, they sit home and they grind their teeth, or they get drunk, or they jerk off to porn, or they develop, prescription opioid, addictions, whatever it is, however they cope with it. And women, on the other hand, say, I guess I'm going to be 35 and I'm going to die alone. Oh, well. And then they go back to their box wine and cats and Ben and Jerry's or whatever it is. That's their sedation. Usually it's ego appeasement. For women, it's usually ego appeasement. It's a better sedation than anything. I know people say box wine. Ego appeasement is it gets you drunk it gets girls drunk way better than anything else. Ego appeasement. So we go to that. And that's what happens. So the hottest women share the hottest men because we live in Sadie Hawkins' world. Exactly the situation on Tinder that Matt doesn't want to address. They're only going 7,500 swipes until they get a meaningful relationship, a meaningful interaction. Who's doing the swiping? Who? It's not like these fiendish men. No, screw her. She's fat. No, it's not them. Look at the differentials, man. Address the real problem, or don't address it at all. Go back to politics, man. You're pretty good at that. Go back to religion. Stay out of the red pill, Matt. Stay out. Jocko, you're good, but red flags are what they are. Not because we're not holding men responsible, but because we use responsibility as our scapegoat, as our rationale. Men should be more responsible. Okay. They shouldn't be online on Twitter swiping left and right. Well, they're not. They're on OnlyFans mostly, but look at the entirety of it. I would say, well, who cares? Nobody cares about this stuff. Well, apparently you do if you're watching this show. Apparently you do if you just made a comment. Apparently Jocko does. Apparently Matt does. Apparently the guys in the roommates certainly do. Apparently Candace Owens does every so often. Yes, you care. You care enough to make a show about it. You care enough to leave a comment about it. So rather than grinding your teeth and thinking you're too cool, or rather than creating a 5 or 10 or 20 or 1 hour video about all how, men need to man up, whatever, at least be complete. At least be comprehensive. There's two sides of this. And I know you don't want to step on the little lady's toes, but sometimes at some point you're going to have to. I can do it right now because I've been doing it for 20 years. And not because I don't like women, because I love women. That's why I want men and women to get together and have babies. I would very much like that to happen. But if we're going to solve problems, we got to look at it from both sides. So there you go. Thank you guys. I will talk to you later. I hope you've enjoyed this. Goodbye.